During our couples session, my wife casually said she'd pick her ex instead of me. The therapist froze. I rose from my seat, told her to go to him, and walked away. That night, the messages she left begging me to return stayed ignored. I was 36 when my entire marriage collapsed under a single sentence. 7 years of being a husband, 9 years of being her partner. All of it undone in a quiet office with dim lighting, a ticking wall clock, and a leather couch that always smelled faintly of stale air and old emotions. We had no children. She never felt ready, always asked for more time, always pushed the conversation to next year, with a smile that felt warm back then. Looking back, maybe that delay was the first crack I ignored. Maybe she knew something I refused to see, that her future never truly included me. We'd been in couples therapy for 3 months at her request. She said our spark had faded, that we needed help stitching ourselves back together. I agreed because when you love someone, you cling to hope even when the threads are fraying. And at first, therapy felt promising. We communicated better than we had in years, the sessions felt productive, and I convinced myself that we were rediscovering the version of us that used to laugh too loudly in restaurants and stay up talking until sunrise. I studied her love languages, opened up about things I'd buried, and believed, genuinely, that we were turning a corner toward a happier future. Then came that Tuesday session. Same seat, same couch, same therapist with her calm, controlled tone. She wanted us to practice radical honesty, a phrase that would end my marriage within the hour. My wife went first. She talked about feeling disconnected, about questioning whether she'd settled too quickly, about the fading excitement of youth. I thought it was normal vulnerability. Every relationship loses some of its shimmer eventually. I listened, nodding, waiting for my turn. The therapist then asked a question that detonated everything. If you could go back and make a different choice, would you? My wife went quiet, so quiet the room felt suspended. And then she whispered the name I feared hearing. Her ex, the man who broke her heart before I met her. The man I unknowingly competed with for space inside her memories for nearly a decade. She confessed she had been following him online, that he'd moved back to our area, that he wasn't married, that what if lingered in her mind more often than she wanted to admit. Before I could process any of that, the therapist asked another question. Have you been in contact with him? Yes, we've messaged, she said softly. It wasn't inappropriate, just catching up. I felt the floor shift. 6 months of secret messages. 6 months of emotional intimacy with someone else while I was pouring my energy into saving our marriage. My pulse was hammering in my ears, but I stayed silent. We agreed this was a place for truth, even when it hurt. The therapist turned toward me, ready to ask how I felt. But my wife kept speaking, as if something inside her had cracked open. I don't know if I married the right person. I love him, my ex. He made me feel alive. When I think about him, it's electric, like it used to be. The therapist leaned forward, sensing something significant. If you had to choose between your husband and your ex in this exact moment, what does your gut say? I expected confusion, tears, hesitation, a struggle, something acknowledging the 9 years we had built together. Instead, she exhaled and said, without a tremor, without blinking, I'd choose him. Silence swallowed the room. Even the therapist's mask slipped for a fraction of a second. The truth landed with the weight of a falling building. 7 years of marriage, 9 years of shared life, and her instinctive choice wasn't me. I stood up, calm, detached, done. Then go choose him. She grabbed for my arm. I stepped away. You just told me you'd pick someone else. I'm not competing for my own wife. And then I walked out of that office, left the building, drove to my friend's apartment, and poured whiskey into a glass until the numbness settled in. Almost midnight, she left a voicemail, crying, begging, pleading for me to come home, claiming she didn't mean it, claiming she panicked. I listened to it once, turned off my phone, and slept on the couch. That was the night my marriage died. Update 1 week later. Meeting the divorce attorney was sobering. A house we jointly owned. 2 cars. Several accounts. No prenup. Years of finances now divided in half by law. The attorney warned me, "You'll lose a lot." But self-respect has a price, and I paid it willingly. Papers were served Wednesday. Her mother called that same night, furious, accusing me of abandoning her daughter over a mistaken statement. I explained calmly, "She didn't hesitate. That wasn't a mistake. That was the truth." The calls continued. Her sister, her best friend, all insisting I was being dramatic, unreasonable, selfish. But none of them had sat on that couch, listening to the woman they loved declare she'd choose someone else. Friday night, she reached me from an unknown number. She cried, begged, insisted she loved me. But when I asked if she'd contacted her ex after therapy, she went silent. That silence told the real story. Update 2-3 weeks later. Her attorney came out swinging, demanding I leave the house, accusing me of hiding money, dragging out the case with pointless motions. The emotional cheating was clearer than ever. Through mutual friends, I discovered her ex had reached out first months ago. Their messages weren't casual. They were frequent, personal, emotional. Therapy wasn't an effort to save our marriage. It was her way of easing the guilt while she evaluated whether her ex might take her back. Her family escalated. Her father showed up at my workplace twice. HR threatened security involvement. Her sister bombarded me with texts from random numbers. Everyone insisted I was destroying the marriage. No one asked what it felt like to be told you were second choice. Then came the twist so sharp it almost felt scripted. Her ex had a girlfriend. A serious one. They were traveling together, meeting families, building a future. My wife had blown up her marriage for a fantasy that never existed. The house listed. Assets divided. Lawyers battled. Her parents funded her aggression. I slept on my friend's couch and reminded myself daily that peace is worth any price. Update 2 months later, final. The divorce is final. Papers signed. Settlement done. House sold slightly under asking. After everything, fees, splits, losses, I walked away with less money but more clarity than I've had in years. She tried one last desperate attempt for spousal support. The judge dismissed it effortlessly. She earns her own income, we have no children, and she didn't sacrifice her career for our home. Clean break. No payments. No strings. Seeing her in court was surreal. She looked older, worn, fragile in a way I had never seen. She tried to speak to me softly when signing the final documents. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it worse. You spoke the truth, not a plan. And your truth didn't include me." She cried. Her mother glared. Her father scowled. I signed and walked out. Days later, I learned her ex was engaged. Her fantasy ended exactly the way her relationship with me ended, with her being someone's second choice. She emailed me one last message apologizing, admitting she meant what she said in therapy, admitting I deserve someone who chooses me first. I didn't respond. Now I live in a small one-bedroom apartment. Quiet, clean. Mine. A place untouched by ghosts of the past. I'm still rebuilding, still healing, but I'm free from the uncertainty that haunted the last years of my marriage. People ask if I regret walking out. I don't. When someone shows you where you rank in their heart, believe them. When someone chooses someone else, even hypothetically, let them go. Never fight for a place in a home where you're already a backup plan. Walking out was the most painful, necessary act of self-respect I've ever committed, and I haven't looked back since. And yet, even with that strange twist of fate setting everything into motion, the night she returned remained the moment that truly reshaped everything inside me. When I walked back into the house, after dragging myself home from a brutal shift, juggling exhaustion and quiet hope, I expected the usual smoke of her annoyance to fill the room. But instead, I found her sitting in the corner of the living room floor, her head buried in her knees, trembling like someone who no longer knew where the world ended and where her fear began. Her hair was messy, her clothes were still dusty from the road, and her face carried a kind of vulnerability I had never seen. Not even in moments when we fought, not even when she accused me of not caring enough, not even when she stood outside the door demanding something bigger than what I could give. It was the first time she looked small, as if life had finally pushed her to the point where pride could no longer save her. When she saw me, she didn't jump, didn't scream, didn't demand answers or explanations. Instead, her eyes lifted slowly, and in that glance, I saw every piece of the storm she had walked through. The disappointment, the betrayal, the panic, the sudden realization that the world she expected to return to had changed without seeking her permission. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. It was like her voice had broken somewhere along the path back. And finally, in a tone so soft it felt like it didn't belong to the same woman who once mocked me for needing time alone, she whispered, "I don't have anywhere. No demands, no blame, no pride." Just those 3 quiet words that carried the weight of everything she once believed was beneath her. I stood there for a moment, caught between the history we shared and the silence now stretching between us. 1,000 memories tried to rise, her laughter, her anger, the days she pushed me away, the nights she pulled me close, but none of them could change the truth standing before me. She had left to search for something brighter, something easier, something she thought she deserved more than whatever she imagined I could give. And when she returned, expecting the same open door she always took for granted, she found a locked world, a world I had closed not out of revenge, but out of necessity, out of self-preservation, out of the quiet understanding that sometimes you lose people long before they walk out. She asked to come inside, not with confidence but with hesitation, like someone approaching a memory rather than a home. And I watched her struggle with her own pride, saw her fingers tremble as she tried to steady herself. In that moment, something softened in me. Not love, not longing, but the recognition that even broken connections deserve a moment of truth. So I stepped aside, letting her enter the house she once treated like a temporary stop, and the silence between us grew thick enough to carry every unspoken question. She kept looking around, noticing the changed locks, the rearranged furniture, the missing traces of her presence. It was only then she realized that while she had been gone, I had rebuilt my life into something quieter, steadier, something that no longer required her chaos to feel complete. She stood in the center of the living room like a shadow searching for a shape long gone, her eyes drifting over the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. She touched nothing, asked for nothing, but the silence between us carried the confession she couldn't speak aloud, that she had finally understood the cost of walking away from something that was never guaranteed to wait. I could see her swallowing her pride in painful gulps, her shoulders tight, her breath uneven, as if she were trying to hold together every fragment of dignity left in her. When she finally looked at me, there wasn't anger, entitlement, or expectation in her gaze, only a quiet ache, the kind that comes when someone realizes too late that they have run out of places to return to. She whispered an apology, soft and trembling, but apologies don't rebuild what is already burned to ash. It wasn't that I hated her. It wasn't that I wanted revenge. It wasn't even that I felt triumphant seeing her struggle. It was simply that something inside me had closed, gently but firmly, in a way that couldn't be reopened. Not because I was cruel, but because the part of me that once reached for her had grown tired of being the only hand extended. I had spent years excusing storms she created, smiling through her sharp words, shrinking myself to fit into the spaces she allowed. But the moment she left, I learned what peace felt like, and peace has a way of teaching you which doors should no longer be unlocked. She asked, almost in a whisper, if she could stay for a while. The old version of me, the one who protected her from herself, who made space even when I had none, would have said yes without thinking. But the man standing in that room now carried the lessons carved into him by the very person asking to come back. I told her gently, without anger, that the house was no longer hers, that the life inside these walls had moved forward, that I had rebuilt everything she once dismissed. And though she tried to hide her reaction, I saw the moment her heart cracked in quiet disbelief, as if she had never considered the possibility of me choosing myself instead of her. She nodded, a stiff, shattered gesture, and walked toward the door with slow, uneven steps. For a moment, I considered calling her back. Not to stay, not to restart anything, but simply to offer a softer goodbye. But some stories end best where they naturally break, and this one had already reached the point where holding on would only reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal. So I watched in silence as she stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her face, her eyes glancing back one last time at a home that no longer recognized her as part of it. When the door closed behind her, there was no triumph, no victory, only a deep, steady quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something simple yet powerful. Sometimes the most painful endings are the ones that save you. Sometimes losing someone is the moment you finally return to yourself. And sometimes, the greatest closure isn't spoken. It's lived, in the peace you protect, in the boundaries you honor, and in the new beginnings that rise from the ruins of what once was.